Hiya, I'm Tamusus, and let's get serious. Yeah! We are talking Holy Paladins, Paladins of the Light. 10.1.5 is here, and I'm going to show you how to wield the light and win the fights. Plenty of changes. Let's get to it. These are your holy power generating abilities. Notice Judgment has been added now to the list. Every Judgment will generate 1 holy power. In addition to that, if you have 4 pieces of the tier set, Holy Prism will, when used on a friendly target, generate 3 holy power, making it something you should crank. So crank in the Holy Prism, save the day, gain the holy power. These are your choices when it comes to spending holy power. Only Shield of the Righteous doesn't cost mana. The other 2 do now. It's outrageous. Now, the light can be wielded with a Light of Dawn, but you must hit your allies. Do not miss. People will die. As well as that, you must make sure that if there's a mechanic where it's worth using Light of Dawn, you use it. But if there's not really a mechanic that's worth using it for, you should probably use Word of Glory instead. Because this is a spray, a frontal spray, and ideally you'd be hitting at least 4 or 5 targets. That's the ideal. Now, Word of Glory, on the other hand, that's a pumping heal. You're going to be pumping that throughout the fight, non-stop. That's your main go-to holy power spender, and it is very powerful. So beware, you might heal someone so much, you forget who they are. Shield of the Righteous is much stronger now. You can go in there and you can crank. Get ready. Pick the talent Shining Righteousness for a damage increase, but also it will mean that every 5 Shield of the Righteousness that you cast, you will then be able to get a free Word of Glory to pick off your buff rack and pump into your allies. So be ready. In addition, it doesn't increase armor anymore. It actually makes your Crusader Strike have less of a cooldown. So try to strike and then Shield of the Righteous. This will make you generate plenty of holy power, as you will want to be picking the talent Holy Infusion. This means that every strike you do gets 25% increased damage and generates 2 holy power. That's a big deal. It's one big deal. You could pick the alternative if you wanted to, but I recommend using Holy Infusion. Gets your power up there when you need it. Could save somebody's life. You could turn that into a Word of Glory, save a life.
Got this, people. Got this.
Hold the flank! You have to hold the flank,
That's a random shriek.
Hold the flank! You ever heard random flank holding before like that? You need to do that. That's how people win the day.
But in a raid situation, it is undoubtedly the way to go to not pick Holy Infusion and to pick Awestruck. This one is very good.
Okay, maybe not as
He died.
Close.
You didn't die in vain.
Awakening has changed! Yes! No longer will it be random. No longer will it be pointless to cast Shield of the Righteous. Now, you can use Shield of the Righteous, Light of Dawn, or Word of Glory to contribute to stacks of Awakening. At 12 stacks, you'll have it a buff on your buff rack, which means that when you next throw Judgment, you will be given an activation of Wings, so you can plan this, you can save it up, and you can throw it when you need it. It's no longer just going to be a random thing, right, that you get Wings randomly. And, of course, when you do 5 shields, you get a 3 Word of Glory, and that does count. Check your talents into the Blessing of Dawn. This is a very important spell to know and understand. As you generate holy power, on your buff rack, you will receive Blessing of Dawn. It can stack up to twice, and it increases the damage of your next holy power spender or the healing by 30% per stack. Important to fill the holy power bar up as often as you can. When you spend holy power, then you gain Blessing of Dusk. This one's a buff on your buff rack that you should also keep up, and it will basically reduce the cooldown of your main holy power generating abilities, which of course Judgment is now included in that list. So make sure you're keeping this buff up at all times as much as you can. The alternative to it is the shielding one, and it's not very good, to be honest, so I wouldn't recommend picking it. Now when you pop Wings and you go Wings, then guess what? Your best choice is going to be the 15% critical strike increase, the standard Wings. It's a bit of a shame, but it's because they've increased the power of Holy Shock, right? So it doesn't really mean that the other one's no good. It's just that you wouldn't use it because you don't gain a benefit towards Holy Shock. Whereas that 15% crit on the Holy Shock is too good to miss out on, I'll tell you straight. Holy Shock is going to be the main thing, the main ability that you must keep track of. It's a strong spell now, really been buffed, and it has up to 2 charges. So keep track and never let yourself be on 2 charges. Always stay on at least 1. When you shock an ally, you'll apply Glimmer of Light. This is a buff on them, and when you next use Holy Shock again, even if it's on a different ally, you will then trigger the healing of the Glimmer of Light. Glimmer of Light's healing has been buffed massively, and this also works when you Holy Shock an enemy, but it becomes a debuff and it deals damage. So make sure that you, throughout the fight, shock as many as you can of your allies and enemies, and keep them alive by shocking again afterwards, because every shock will apply a Glimmer of Light. These are the talents that they've added in as well to further buff the passive healing that you have and to reward you for applying those glimmers. The first one basically means that when you trigger the healing of Glimmer with somebody's at 100% HP, no longer does it go to waste. Now it will become an absorption shield, which is pretty glorious. That is so fun. A glorious sight. Yep, cranking them. Next one is a bit more boring. It's a passive damage reduction, but it's another reason to bring a glorious Holy Paladin to the key, right?
Don't die now.
Finally, every time you use a Holy Power spelling ability, you will have a 25% chance to trigger a Glimmer of Light healing or damage. Fantastic.
Word of
Extra passive healing. When you do them Word of Glories, pump them in, you can get a trigger of Glimmer. Finally, I say the best to last. The more glimmers you have, the more chance you have to be able to use Holy Shock, but it not have a cooldown. So you would simply have 2 charges of Holy Shock, shock somebody, and still have 2 charges. Pretty crazy, right? So there's your incentive. Get the glimmers up! It's key. Reclamation is the most important talent to pick. You must pick it. It will give you plenty of mana back across the course of a fight, but also will make your Holy Shocks quite a bit stronger as you heal players who are low. So when somebody's low, ideally, you don't Holy Prism them first. You know, you don't lay on hands. You do a shock first because it gains extra healing depending on how much HP they've got missing. And you get your mana back. Win-win. Then you can follow it up with a Holy Prism, for example. Even mana regeneration is tied closely now to Holy Shock due to the new ability Daybreak. When you've put your glimmers out there and you press Daybreak, for every glimmer, you will get back mana. So make sure that you've got plenty of glimmers. A great way to ensure that you know how many glimmers you've got is to use a Weakaura. I found this one, it's fantastic. I'll put it in the description so you can copy paste it. It basically puts the icon on your screen. You can see the number of glimmers you've got. GG. GG! After you cast Daybreak, check your buff rack. You've got this crazy buff called Rising Sunlight. I call it the machine gun Holy Shock buff, okay? It's glorious. When you use your next Holy Shock, you're going to get 3 shocks for the price of 1, okay? And it's going to trigger Glimmer's healing 3 times over. So make sure that you keep track of this buff, are aware of it, don't let it expire and go to waste. And also, don't put it in there unless you put your Glimmers up, ideally. You could use a toll to do that. We'll get to that later. Infusion of Light will occur. It's a buff you should keep track of. Every time you Holy Shock and you get a critical strike, it will appear. Now, when you consume that buff by either throwing a Judgment or using a Flash Heal or a Holy Lights, then you're going to reduce the cooldown on your next Holy Shock, which is fantastic. The best way to do it by far is with a Judgment, especially if you've got your Machine Gun Holy Shock buff ready as well, but you've got a cooldown on Holy Shock. You can quickly throw a Judgment to get the cooldown back, and then boom, 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 machine gun them down with them Holy Shocks. Great fun. Before you use Divine Toll, make sure you do a couple of Holy Shocks. Get it on cooldown. Why? Well, because you're going to be firing 5 Holy Shocks with Divine Toll, and that will most likely get you an Infusion of Light, which you can then throw a Judgment afterwards and get back the cooldown of Holy Shock. Now, Daybreak is also closely tied to Divine Toll, because Divine Toll is the most powerful way to get yourself glimmers everywhere, right? It's the best way. So make sure you aim to save them together. What you don't want to do is press Daybreak, trigger your glimmers, and then start using your machine gun Holy Shocks. No. All your glimmers have been triggered. It's no good. They've gone. Instead, you Daybreak, then you toll, get your glimmers up, get them up, boys, and then you get out, get machine gun Holy Shock in, GG Alliance, crank them down, and that's the way it's done. And there's no better way than that. Even if it's on allies, equally as good. It's not always possible to keep them together. Sometimes you got to do that Divine Toll. Sometimes you got to save a life. You got to make a sacrifice for the Lord. Don't worry about it. It happens. Heal one guy, get the other guy heal for free. That's Beacon of Light. You apply this buff, and you get it by default as a Holy Paladin to any party member. The party member you choose will receive 35% of the healing that you do. So no matter who you heal, 35% of it is going to be duplicated onto that target. Pick somebody who's low on HP and aim to keep the group up. You have two challenge choices when it comes to Beacon of Light to accompany it. You can pick Beacon of Faith or you can pick Beacon of Virtue. The best one in my opinion is Beacon of Faith because it's up all game. Beacon of Virtue only lasts 12 seconds and it can be very powerful because it hits everyone with Beacon in the party, up to 5 members. And it's good for an AoE situation, but most of the time you're going to be using Beacon of Faith. Beacon of Faith, you need to make sure you move it though. Moving your beacons is the key to victory. If you have 2 targets beacon there on 100% HP, beacons are useless. So move it around, try to keep everybody up together by moving your beacons. And hitting people who have not got a beacon will ensure that you make the most of your beacons, get the entire party up as soon as possible.
I don't let them get us now, mates.
Tears Deliverance is a very important casted heal. You'll cast it, it will apply a buff to your allies, increasing their healing received from Flash of Light and Holy Light by 25%, but also giving them a healing over time effects. Now, your goal should be to extend the duration of Tears Deliverance, so much so that it's off cooldown by the time it ends. You can do that by using Flash of Light and Holy Light. But now, since the rework, you can also use Holy Shock. So you should aim to make sure before you do Divine Toll or Daybreak that you've got Tears Deliverance up, and then you can benefit from your Machine Gun Holy Shocks, which is obviously 3 shocks for 1 global, and make the Tears Deliverance extended as far as it can, with ease, essentially. In addition to that, Hand of Hindrance gives you instant cast Holy Lights. It's a new talent. You should also look to couple that with Tears Deliverance, not only because you get a 25% increase from Tears Deliverance on the healing of Holy Light, but because it will extend the duration so much so. The best Paladins will only have about 20 seconds left on their Tears Deliverance by the time their Tears Deliverance buff has left the party.
Let's go now. Yes, there again.
Main rotation. Start the fight with Hand of Hindrance, then Tears Deliverance, get him out the way. Then Holy Shock an enemy to start the Glimmer of Lights rolling. Throw a Judgment in there to get the Consecration proc and increase your damage done. By that point, the tank's gathered, so get on your horse, get in there, and try to put down a Consecration that you can stand in, of course, to increase the damage of your Shield of the Righteous and increase the healing of your Word of Glory. Next up, perhaps your Holy Shock, the first one critted, and you've consumed by throwing that last Judgment and Infusion of Light. Has your Holy Shock counter gone up to 2 again, or are you on 1 Holy Shock? If you're on 1, you're doing fine, you didn't get a crit. If you're on 2, bloody hell, mate, better spend it. When you spend it, look at your Blessing of Dawn on the buff rack. Is it going up? Are you generating Holy Power to increase the damage of your next spender? You could spend your next spender on Word of Glory, make sure you pick a beacon target, or you could spend your next spender on a Shield of the Righteous. But remember, Shield of the Righteous reduces the cooldown on your Crusader Strike. So always Crusader Strike first. So your next move will be to Crusader Strike and then Shield of the Righteous. Holy Prism is the next one you want to use. Big cooldown, 20 seconds. Using it on an ally will give 3 Holy Power and it will do AoE damage to the enemies around you. So Holy Prism next. That's key. Daybreak, whack it in there. That will consume your Glimmer of Lights. So you need to Divine Toll after that to reapply them. And then you've got your Machine Gun Holy Shocks at the ready on Glimmer targets. On the main rotation, throwing Judgment, always be careful. Maybe you're about to hit 12 stacks. Maybe you already have. Maybe you're going to throw away a Wings. Keep track of this buff. In addition to that, another buff is Divine Purpose. As you use your spenders, you have a chance to make your next spender free and deal 15% more healing or damage. So you could save these up and you can use them in the fight to get through a certain mechanic. Keep track of those buffs on your buff rack. That's probably the most important ones to keep track of. Then you've got your Infusion of Light procs, which occur from your Holy Shocks. You can consume them immediately, to be honest, because you want to get as many Holy Shocks out as possible to increase your Glimmer count as best as you can, and also it's just your strongest heal. Then you've got Blessing of Dusk and Blessing of Dawn. As you spend Holy Power, you gain Blessing of Dusk, keep it up. Then you get Blessing of Dawn as you build Holy Power with your generating abilities. So try and get 2 stacks before you spend. Make sure you keep track and take advantage of these buffs. It's very important. Very, very important. It's the difference between being an okay Paladin, having an okay time, or being a great Paladin and wielding the lights. I included these sheets in as well. Perhaps they're useful, hopefully they are, and it will give you an idea of what you should prioritize throughout the fights. And of course, situations can change this, but this is a good baseline. Hopefully that's helpful. Aura Mastery, you must be ready to use this at any point. It's got a 3-minute cooldown. If you couple it up with Devotion Aura, it will give the entire raider party a 15% damage taken reduction. So, having that through a specific mechanic can sometimes be the difference between being able to heal through it or not. If you wanted to, you could couple it up as well with Concentration Aura. This will make you immune to silence. So it's useful against like the bats in Alderman or any situation where that's required. Blessing of Sacrifice is a very powerful ability now. Don't just use it on the tank. Use it on your allies, especially if you know they're going to take heavy single target damage. It will transfer a portion of all the damage they take to you, but also when the buff ends, they'll gain Echoing Blessings, which will reduce their damage taken by a flat amount. It's a very powerful tool to use throughout Mythic Plus dungeons and in raids.
Good. You would have been dead.
Blessing of
I'm
Freedom
clearing them out,
makes you
boys.
immune to movement
Coming
impairing
through.
effects. Very
No
powerful.
way.
Always try to cheese and use this to avoid mechanics for you and your friends. Whether it's a boss fight in Mythic Plus or whether it's a trash pack, if you're confident you can get rid of it, then give it a go. Even if you're not confident, give it a go. Blessing of Protection, a fantastic spell, removes most bleeds and removes most physical debuffs, granting immunity to damage taken to that target from physical attacks. Fantastic. But it also removes all threat. So if you ever get into a situation where you'd like to save your tank, but you've got nothing to save him with, you could bop him. As long as he's ready to dispel it afterwards to regain threat. You can also do this on people that ninja pull by mistake, like my friend here, and they won't die. All the threat will just vanish. It's fantastic. Use it, and as long as the tank's got a Cancelaura Macro, save his life. Blessing of the Seasons. The first one of them is Blessing of Summer. Now this is a buff you have to apply. You're going to spec for it, you're going to pick it, it's great. Give the summer out to somebody, that's what it starts as, summer. And that will increase their damage done by giving them extra holy damage with their attacks. That damage will be on your details. So if you're wondering how much you did with that buff, check your own details, your own damage done. Blessing of Autumn is the next one. That will increase their damage by reducing their cooldown recovery rate, right? So you've got 10-second cooldown on Judgment, now it's going to be 8 because you've buffed them with this ability. You could use it on yourself to get yourself more holy shocks in a tight healing situation, but mostly you don't need to. Mostly you will use it on your allies so that they can do more damage and get you through that M+ key in time. Blessing of Springs is the next one that you'll cycle through into, and you can use this in a raid on your allies actually, on one of your mates as a healer. He'll love you for it. Gives them a lot of increase on healing, so if you've got a priest in your group that you know is going to crank in a raid, give it to them. In an M+ situation, you're pretty much always going to give it to yourself to give yourself healing increase. Finally, there's a mana regeneration one, Blessing of Winter. Again, you can use it on your allies that are healers. But yeah, pretty strong. Keep cycling through it. Keep using them so that you can get as much of the damaged ones as possible. You know, you use the buff, then you have to wait 15 seconds, then use the next one, and the next one, etc. And it cycles through them. So make sure throughout the dungeon you're using it consistently. Talents. Since the rework, these talents are by far the best. No doubt about it. You can still do a Melee Wings Paladin or a caster build if you want to, but unfortunately, this build is by far superior as it greatly relies on Holy Shock and takes advantage of all the new talents that we discussed in the video. I recommend you pick these talents and you keep Holy Shock on cooldown. For the class tree, I recommend that you actually do tweak it a little bit. So you would take out the disease dispel at the top left if you notice no diseases in the dungeon that you're going to do, and you would spec for either Repentance or Turn Evil on the Incorporeal Affix week. So make sure that on that week you're ready to be able to actually help the Incorporeals. You could also add in an extra duration increase on the Divine Steed, but that's about it really. I'd keep most of the rest of it intact. Now, I hope you can wield the light and win the fight in Mythic Plus at least. As a Holy Paladin, it ain't easy, but keep on pumping! Thank you very much for watching. Comment and like if you enjoyed the video. If you've got any kind of questions, I'll answer. Thank you very much for rallying up in the stream as well. I'll see you in there. Remember, good rails!